All right, hi everybody. This is Ebere as usual. So we are going to get right into it. Last week we talked about the different options and programs that were available and looked at, the qualifications for the PPP. Today we're going to actually be looking at the PPP Forgiveness Calculation. So how to calculate how much of the PPP loan that you're applying for that will be forgiven. Then what I'll do is I'll talk about some things at the end. I'm going to ask everybody to try and mute yourselves while I'm talking, and then you can open it back up when it's time to address questions. So right now, what I am going to do is to get the information to share my screen. All right, so everybody can see my screen, right? Okay, I hear noddings. Okay. All right, so let's just go through this quickly, and then what I'll do is I'll stop at an interval, we'll take questions, and then we'll move on. So, of course, I'm gonna send this out to everybody, but this is just, I wanted to discuss it with you guys first. It's still not finalized. Let me see, I need to make sure that everybody is muted. Mute, 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 okay. Okay, all right. So the first thing is that the PPP loan that you received is a 2%, a 2-year, 1% loan. I mean, that's not bad for a loan. So even if you do not get it forgiven, just having a 1% loan is a big deal. It's almost at 0%. And payments start within 2 months of the funding date. Within 6 months. You are able to request a loan forgiveness within that first 6 months to make any payment. The form is already out. I'm not necessarily worried about filling out the form now. I suspect, one, there will be changes, there will be updates, and because it functions almost like a tax form, they're probably going to have an electronic version that can be submitted or prepared, or there'll probably be a software company out there that makes it easier. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about filling out this forgiveness application. You really just want to have your PPP loan forgiveness worksheet. And I know that most banks or the people that you got your approval from would have already sent you that worksheet or is on their website in terms of, starting to document your calculations. I suspect that a lot of things are going to change. In terms of what's going to be forgiven, what's going to be extended, and all that, I really do. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about this first or second payments that you have to make now, because if anything is going to be coming out, I suspect it'll probably be in the next 2 weeks, middle of June type thing. So it's just to have an idea and to start keeping track of what you have, but I necessarily wouldn't make any final decisions yet until all of the documentation and guidance is out. I feel like they're going to make changes to a lot of things, as has been happening in the last couple of months. So here are the general guidelines. You must use at least 75% of the proceeds for payroll, but you can use up to 100% for payroll and have it forgiven. Payroll includes the gross payroll paid to employees, the employer portion of the pension and retirement benefits and health insurance. Those you have to prorate for 2 months. So if you make like one payment a year for health insurance or for retirement benefits, you just prorate it just for the 2 months. And then it does not include the payroll taxes or payroll processing fees. If you don't use 100% of the proceeds for payroll, you may use up to 25% for rent, utilities, and mortgage, not for your home or home office. So until they come out with clear guidance on that, it does not include the home office. You must keep the same head count. So you need to calculate the average number of full-time employees in 2019 and compare it with 2020. Very complicated, but you know, all just those that have employees, and most of the people on the line today do not have employees. So you're just really dealing with yourself. For those that have employees, you know, just look at the 2019 full-time employees, part-time employees, and you kind of need to maintain the same head count. If you don't think that you're going to maintain that head count, then you can reach out so we can start having discussions on what needs to be done. You cannot increase the salary or get additional bonus for an owner employee. So this applies to everybody else on the call. If you're self-employed, if you're an independent contractor, a partner for your business, and it's really just you, you cannot give yourself a bonus, unfortunately, during this period, and you cannot get a salary increase to do the calculation. You're allowed to increase the compensation for any employee, but you cannot reduce anybody's salary by more than 25%. So keep in mind that there's a cap of $100,000 salary cost per employee on all calculations. So what I'll do right now is I'll stop sharing my screen. Let us address any questions that anybody has based on what we just covered before we move on. So if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can send it by chat. I'm also going to send out a question to everybody.
Hi, Ebere, it's Tudor.
Hey, hi Tudor, how are you?
Good. Just one quick question. So you said we can potentially increase the salaries of other employees, but we cannot do it for ourselves, correct?
Yes.
Can we hire new employees in this time?
Yes, you can hire new employees. The only issue that you may run into is going to be whether or not you keep them after. So you do need to do those calculations because it needs to make business sense. If you hire them for those purposes, are you going to keep them after the 2 months? If you end up not keeping them, because there's a possibility that this will be looked at later on and some kind of certifications later on down the road, then you don't, you know, you really don't want to appear as if you just hired them in order to do the, in order to get the PPP. So should you hire, yes, continue to make the right business decisions, but you would kind of need to keep them on payroll and continue on payroll. I don't know how long you would need to do that for. We're probably going to have to wait until we get more guidance on that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm asking my staff for last week's webinar so that I can post it here, and then I'll answer more questions before we move on. Okay. All right. Hi, Miguel. Hi, Ari. We have payroll the same day we received the loan deposited into our checking. Can we include that payroll? Technically, we paid the payroll the day before, but the employees received their pay on that day. You start counting 8 weeks from when you got it deposited. So that means that even though it's the payroll that you did the day before will not count, that means that it's going to run you beyond the June, you know, the end of June pay date. So you're still going to be able to do 4 payroll. So if you didn't get this first payroll of May, you're going to be able to get the first payroll of July. All right, so right now I'm sending the link to last week's webinar. This is for anybody that missed it and wants to know if they're qualified. Does anybody have any other questions before we move on? Okay, moving on, I'm going to share my screen.
Hi, Ebere, it's Erin and Miguel. Sorry, we just had one more question. We received the advance early on. Is that automatically forgiven, or is that part of the PPP?
Yes, I am going to be talking about it here. Whatever you received for the advance, you would reduce the PPP forgiveness amount by that. So let's just say you got $100,000 of PPP. Automatically, you have $10,000 that you're going to pay back because it's only going to be based on $90,000 of the forgiveness amount. So you will be paying back at least $10,000 of the PPP amount.
Okay, so the advance we always need to pay back.
Well, the PPP you need to pay back. You don't pay back the 10,000, but you would subtract it from the for the
I see.
amount of the PPP forgiveness. We're saying the same thing, but it just technically it's really the PPP that you have to pay back in the amount of 10,000.
I understand now. Thank you.
Okay, so Sheen's screen sharing. I said Sheen sharing. You can tell I'm tongue twisted. All right, so let us continue. You are, okay, self-employed individuals. That is most people on this call. So self-employed individuals and partners that use their net income from Schedule C or K1 for purposes of payroll costs will receive an automatic 73.84% forgiveness for those amounts and have up to 25% that can be used for commercial rent, utilities, mortgage. So all self-employees and K1 partners would need to pay back at least a portion of the loan. So when we're talking about a portion of the loan, you're going to be paying back at least, what is it? What's the calculation? 1.16%, assuming that you do not use the 25%. I know that there was a question about being able to use 100% of the loan. We will need to get clarity on that, that if you're going to, because I know that an automatic 73.4 will be forgiven, but what happens if you used 25% and if you didn't use it for rent, utilities, or mortgage? Does that mean that what you're going to pay back is about 26.16%? I sent that question out to the other CPAs, and so I'm waiting to hear back on that. Again, this is a very particular use case, so you ignore it if it's not applicable. Failure to comply with these guidelines will result in a reduction, partially or completely, of your overall forgiveness amount. Also keep in mind that if you receive the EIDL, that's what Erin just asked, it would also reduce the forgiveness amount as well. Now, the coverage period for the mortgage, interest, rents, and utilities is exactly 8 weeks following the funding date. But for payroll, you can either use the funding date or the date of the following payroll check to start your 8 weeks. So to achieve maximum forgiveness, you must take action and make these payments during that period. We recommend that you are monitoring your payroll costs, rents, utilities, mortgage, interest during the 8-week period to make sure it adheres to the guidelines. You can hire us for the service only if you explicitly request it, meaning if you need to help us track it for you, if you need to help us complete the forms, but you will be expected to proactively monitor these expenses your own. The actual forgiveness process, same thing. You have the capacity to prepare it on your own, but if you need help with us, we will charge $275 an hour, and we cannot offer any guarantees of forgiveness. You know, same thing. We'll work within the guidelines and stuff. So this is pretty much it. I have other things to cover, but I wanted to cover what are the big hot button items that everybody needs to account for. So I will stop sharing screen, take any questions, and then we can move on to the next set of items.
Hi, Ebere, it's Mary. The question I have, if you're, self-employed, you're K1, and you work at home, the utilities and the mortgage interest, is that really kind of on utilities on an office space you might have? I'm just wondering what that 25%, if any, you could get back if you're kind of an at-home in your own office person.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to claim the home office. Like I said, we're waiting on guidance on that.
Yep.
Right now, the home office, the percentage of the home office is excluded. But with everybody working from home and all these things, like I said, there probably will come out with guidance on that later on. But like I said last week on the call, I would not count it. It's probably going to be a very minimal amount because you're going to do divided by 52 weeks times 8 weeks. And so most of the home office deduction is going to be very minimal, if any.
Can I ask you, when it comes to mortgage interest, do they mean on your personal home?
No, it
The
means
reason I say that
it
is,
means for
no.
a business off. It means for an actual office space. Yes, not your home.
Got it.
Mhm.
Okay. It just seems like if you're, just the way it sounds, if you're self-employed at home, you're really not going to, in general, be able to, unless there's new guidelines, be able to get the other 25% forgiven right now.
Yes, that's what it's sounding like, and it's
Okay.
actually sounds like it's 26.16%. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ebere, it's me, Tudor again.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, if you end up at the end of those 2 weeks using only, let's say, less than 50% of that loan being forgivable, are you allowed to keep the rest of the amount as a loan without questions?
We have not addressed that issue yet. Most of the CPAs are advising their clients to go back and recalculate what that amount should have been. And if that amount was overstated, because that means that the reason why, so forget about the 25%, but let's assume that outside of that 25%, that you can keep. I think you'll
Yes.
just have the 2 years to pay it off. But if it's something where it was overstated, because a lot of these banks are acting crazy. They're just approving stuff. I actually had somebody who was approved just based off of having independent contractors. So what CPAs are advising, the general guidelines now, is that it was not prepared accurately, and so it should be returned. What I'm advising my clients is I don't think we're the only ones that would have made this mistake. And so for me, I would rather wait. I suspect in about a month and a half, there's going to be some guidance about that. They may end up doing the same safe harbor they did with the certification. When the certification came out, initially they said, based on economic uncertainty, and that if you know that you don't have economic uncertainty, you need to return those funds. And so a lot of small businesses were panicking, but they came out and said, if you did not get up to $2 million of the PPP loan, you did not need to do a certificate. You did not need to go back and recertify. So you can just move forward from where you are. So I think they're giving a lot of latitude to small business owners because they do understand that this is a very tricky situation. And I agree that the banks and their underwriters should have done their due diligence before they approved the loans. And if they went ahead and approved these loans without doing their due diligence, I don't see why the small business owner needs to pay for that. So I think we should just wait for additional guidance. I suspect just like the certification guidance came and it did not apply to anybody who got the loan for under 2 million, I suspect the same thing may happen where they'll just give you the 24 months to pay it off. But my advice would be keep it in an account, don't use it, just go back and do the right calculations. Like I even had to go back and do my calculations, which is okay, but just go back and do the right calculations. What should it have been? And based on that amount, keep that in an account for PPP. Anything that is excess, just have it in a reserve account. And then make sure that you have it in a reserve account and don't do anything until you get further guidance. And it's even something that I'm sure that once the banks get through this stage of where the money runs out and now turns to the forgiveness piece, they're probably all also going to be offering their own guidance on which, I don't know, it may end up being on a bank by bank, case by case basis on what the banks want to do.
I see. Okay. Also, is there any time limit after those 8 weeks to apply for forgiveness?
6 months. So they're saying six
Okay.
months, but it's with everything happening now, they said till June to use the money. I think it's going to be changed because we're not even reopened. Tax deadline may be extended again. I suspect that even though they say 6 months, they may end up extending it because, look at when this whole thing started. Wasn't it March that the PPP started? So we're barely, 2 months and we still haven't quite figured it out. And we're not done funding. So I suspect that we have to get through the funding piece first and start dealing with the forgiveness. I think it's going to run beyond the 6 months.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a question here for PDQ. Can I use mortgage interest or utilities for Quentin Holdings and Adele solo expenses? No, you cannot, because it was not paid before. So those expenses, the mortgage interest, utilities, were used in the calculation of the home office. So what happens is when we prepare your tax returns, if you have a home office, but you're a partner in a K1, you'll get that K1. It goes on your individual return, and then we now have to attach a home office calculation to it. So the home office calculation that we have actually shows up on your individual return. It does not show up on the business return. And so because of that, you will not be able to use the home mortgage interest and taxes on the business, because these expenses needed to have been in place. Let me go ahead and share this screen. Now, these expenses needed to have been in place prior to 2020. So you see here where it says mortgage interest or real property for mortgages in effect prior to 2/15 for rent. So if we were not already paying mortgage interest, we were not already paying utilities and all that prior to the whole pandemic, you cannot turn around and pay it through the business now, unfortunately, until we get more guidance on that. So nothing to apply. Yes, there's nothing to apply. No, well, from what I understand, the 75%, let me go back and look, but I don't think the 75% includes the retirement. I think that's just pure wages. Let me look at the document I have. I know I'm still revising it, but hold on. So, okay. So it looks like that, because one article that we had before was saying that you don't have to include the retirement benefits as part of the payroll calculation. This one is saying. So in that case, yes, it looks like there's nothing that a small business owner can do with their 25% at this time if you were not already paying, like the phone and all of that through the business. Yes, the solo 401k was part of what we mentioned before here. You can use that for the employer portion of the retirement benefit. So that would be the profit sharing portion of the solo 401k. But all of that would go as part of the 73.84% of cost. So right now it looks like small business owners, self-employed, K1 partners and all that, right now we're kind of out 26.16%. So you are able to use the solo 401k, but because it's self-employed individuals and partners, it will not be more than the 73.84% for the forgiveness amount. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and just continue on. These may just be things that are repeating themselves. It's just several things that I copied down that we will look at together as we go through this process. So any EIDL, if you got EIDL, remember there's an EIDL loan and there's an EIDL advance. This is the EIDL. You are allowed to refinance the EIDL. And let me talk about that for a second. If you applied for the EIDL prior to March 30th, SBA, if you sign back into your portal, SBA is requiring that you go back and reapply if your SBA number started with like 2. So if you haven't heard anything about the EIDL loan and you applied prior to March 30th, you might want to reach out to SBA or go back into your portal so that you can resubmit. Right now, the EIDL is closed. They're only approving it for agricultural businesses. But if you had applied before and have not heard anything back, you want to go and check on that. Also, we are noticing that some people that use the fintech lenders, they are starting to sell the PPP loans. So you may get an email saying that your PPP loan has been sold. Should not change the terms or anything that you're doing. It's just an FYI. So we've talked about calculating the payroll cost, calculating any decrease if you have full-time employees, calculate any reduction in payroll, calculate any adjustment in wages for people that you consider. Now, if you have employees and they refuse to come back to work, you will not be held responsible for the forgiveness amount. So if you've offered them to come back to work and they're not coming back to work, you will not be required to pay back that amount. We've talked about you cannot do more than $100,000. Most payroll providers are developing the compliance reports. Some lenders are requiring that the PPP loan proceeds be put into a separate bank account. So let me go now. The next thing that we're going to look at there's other things about like bookkeeping and stuff that I wanted to share. Let me get that for us. All right, I'm gonna stop this here and share the screen here. This is by another CPA, by the way. I thought that what they wrote was very informative, so I figured that we can use that in our discussion. All right, so here we go, sharing my screen. So I just wanted to look at these tips because for those of you that are using QuickBooks. You'll want to create a long-term liability account for the PPP loan, categorize any PPP-related expenses. You'll also want to break out your payroll costs to account for the exclusion of federal taxes paid and exclusion of annual compensation. So what I did with my calculation, I split out the calculation. Full-time employees, part-time employees, independent contractors, and the federal, the employer portion of the federal taxes. So when you're processing payroll, all these amounts are included. But for the PPP, it's just the full-time employees and part-time employees is what you use for the PPP forgiveness. So what we did was I had a separate bank account set up, and then, sorry, let me stop sharing so I can see you guys' face. Yeah, so what I did was I set up a separate bank account, and then we did the calculation with what is in payroll. Anything for the full-time employees and the part-time employees is gonna be taken out of the PPP account. Then anything for the independent contractors and the employer portion of the payroll taxes, because ADP is refusing to split that, so everything is going to come out of the account, then we're just going to use our operating account to reimburse for the independent contractor and the employer portion of the payroll taxes. So let me continue sharing our screen here. Let's look at some more tips. So use the report features in QuickBooks for your advantage. They're definitely gonna come up with something. And then lastly, I've recommended that many clients opt to have their PPP funds deposited into a separate bank account and then use those funds to reimburse. I think it's one of the most accurate ways to ensure that funds are used appropriately. One more note, timing is important. Make note of the date of the approval of funds and disbursement and know when your 8-week period begins and when it ends. Reach out to your financial institution to get any clarification that you need. So as of round 2, this was May 10th, they've approved 2 million loans, 188 billion, 5,000 lenders, average loan size is 73,000. So hopefully in the next week or so, they'll let us know how much PPP funds are left. So that's about it for me. What I also wanted to discuss with those that are in PG County, PG County has reopened their application for the relief program in PG County. If you're not in PG County, please also check with your also check with your county, because what they're doing now is that there are areas that have been more impacted. PG is definitely one of it. We have the highest African-American population. And so what they did initially, they were doing like $5,000 grants and then $5,000 or $10,000 loans, but they also got PPP funds as a county. So what they're doing now is that they are extending that to $100,000 of actually grants. Is no longer going to be a loan. If you have already applied from PG County, they are going to reach back out to you to give you the opportunity to apply for an increased amount. So if you don't hear anything from them, maybe by next week, you can actually call, you can actually reach out to the PGEDC Economic Development Corporation to get more information. But I just wanted to bring that information out that PG County now has an open application. So I will take more questions, and now we're opening up for general. If you have any questions that don't really have anything to do with what we talked about, feel free to ask it at this point. I'll just address questions and then we will probably be done in 7 minutes. Let me address this here. Okay, so I don't have any questions. So now I can do open questions until we're ready to go.
Can I ask you a question, Ebere?
Yes.
Last meeting that you had, you were talking about, we have a separate business, a real estate business also, the, rentals. Mm-hmm. And we applied for the PPP. We haven't heard back. But you were saying that it's not a good idea or they're not going to approve two loans, one for the main business, one for the second business, or?
Yes, if you have affiliated companies, you can only get one loan approval. But the reason, let me go and look at your return really quickly, but the reason why you may not be approved for the second one would be that you don't have any earned income from that business. If I remember it clearly, that second business, because it's real estate, you don't have any earned income. You have passive income from that business. And because you have passive income from that business, there will really technically be no payroll, like there's no amount there that will qualify you, because the amount that is used to calculate the payroll amount for businesses would be the ones that have self-employment income. So if you have a business, but you had a net loss from the business in 2019, you're not going to get it. If you have passive income and it's from real estate and you did not have any income subject to self-employment tax, you will not qualify for the PPP. But I'm just looking real quick now just to confirm, and I'll let you know if we had any, because I know sometimes one of the strategies that we use is that we will pay a management fee to the owners to enable them contribute to the retirement account, enable them pay Social Security for retirement and all that. But that's, one-off strategy that is used. It doesn't apply to everybody. Let me go back and check to see if that was done in this case. Yes, so from what I'm looking at here, we did not have any officer compensation for the real estate. And so there will not be any PPP for that business.
So if they approve it, is it better not to accept it? I guess that's my main question.
Yes, if they approve it, reach out to me and let's look at the facts and circumstances and decide which one you should take. And then I'll need to review what you actually submitted. But the one that we should be using is the one that actually pays you. So let me go back in and confirm the one, because I would usually be looking at your individual tax return to confirm which one you should be using. So I'll let you know in a second. Yeah, so you should be using the one that pays you the salary. So that's the one that you should be using. The one that pays you the salary. The one that does not pay you the salary, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use that.
Hi, Ebere. We did accept the PPP loan from Rubio Mechanical, which does pay us the salary and which we have the employees. But for Ola
Yeah,
Mega,
so that means that you're fine. Any other
Yeah.
one that is approved probably will need to be returned.
okay, the real estate one, the Ola Mega, they did give us the loan. It wasn't PPP, it was the regular from the SBA, the
The EIDL, yeah, okay.
Is that okay? We already,
Yes, if it's an EIDL loan, that you can accept EIDL and PPP together. You just can't use it for the same, to pay for the same expenses.
okay. This, I assume because it's for the Ola Mega, the EIDL will end up repaying. I don't think we can get any forgiveness for that, but we.
No, there's no forgiveness, but I mean, it's a really, really, really good
Yes.
program. 3.75, 30 years, you can't beat it.
Right. Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, so I have a question here for self-employed. Should we be considering returning the 26? We cannot use or wait for, I think you should wait. Because one way that I'm looking at it, I think Tudor had asked that question. What's the worst that can happen? It's a loan for 2 years at 1%. Where else are we gonna get a loan for 2 years at 1%? I will not, I would hold on to it as much as I can. And rather than returning it, I'll use it to make a payment. I'm sure that as real estate investors, we have other loans out there that are more than 1%. I'm sure we have 3% loans, 4% loans, 5% loans. So even if the loan is not going to be forgiven and I'm not going to use it for any of these, as long as they don't give us guidance on that, because we took out these loans with the assumption that there will be that 25% that's going to apply. Until they come out with guidance, I would wait on using it. But if after the waiting period, that 8-week period, there's no answer, or they haven't come out with guidance, it will just be converted to a loan. We will check with the banks at that time. And if the banks say don't return it, use it and treat it as a loan, you'll just use it to pay down one of your other existing loans. And you know, it's like I said, you're getting a 1% rate. So I wouldn't do anything with that money just yet. I would hold on to it. As long as you're not in an emergency. If you get into an extreme emergency, then reach out to the bank at that time and find out what they want you to do.
And another related question is for affiliated businesses. If you get one PPP for one company and you got approved for the other one affiliated, can you keep the other one as a loan?
They're saying that it needs to be returned because it shouldn't have been approved in the first place. But my position is, do not worry about returning it now. I would wait a couple, 5-6 weeks to get additional guidance before making that decision, because I'm suspecting they may end up doing the same safe harbor provision that was done. I'll say don't spend it, but I wouldn't necessarily say return it now. I'll just keep it in a reserve account till you get further guidance. If there's no further guidance, then you would have to reach out to the bank after the 8-week period to decide on what you need to do.
Thank you.
Ebere, it's Wes. I missed last week's seminar on the PPP, and so I didn't apply for it. Now, do I need to contact you separately to review if I qualify, or how do I go about it?
I'll do that real quickly now while we're on the call. That's what we were doing last week, helping everybody to decide whether they should apply. And the good thing is that a lot of people ended up applying and they got approved. So that's some good news. So while I'm looking at other questions, let me pull up your information and then I can let you know whether or not you qualify. If you qualify, then I'll have somebody reach out to you about the process. So I have a question here. Does actual PPP distribution payments made for payroll have to match 2019 Schedule C net income exactly to qualify for the forgiveness, not more than net income since final tax return? They have not come up with guidance on that. They just said use an estimate and that estimate amount. So as long as we can establish that at the time of applying for the loan, we use the estimate amount. I think it should be fine until we get further guidance on that. Because they said if you have not yet filed your tax return, go ahead and prepare the Schedule C and the partnership return to the best of your ability and submit that. So if we can show that, that's what we did, I think we should be fine. Okay, right now I'm going in to check and see whether or not you qualify. All right. All right, so unfortunately, you do not have anything that qualifies you for this program. And the reason why you don't qualify for this program is because you have net business loss. You don't have net business income from 2019. As a result of that, you will not qualify. Now, if you were getting, let me see what you have. If you were receiving, yes, so you do have gig independent contractor payments that you were receiving, you do qualify to apply for unemployment with Maryland. So you probably want to pursue the unemployment option with Maryland.
Okay. Now, actually, I did get approved for the EIDL only yesterday.
Mm-hmm. The advance or the loan?
The loan.
Okay. So that's because the EIDL loan is something that is separate. It's separate from the PPP calculation. That one you would be paying back over the 30 years at the 3.75. Yeah. That's good.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions as we wrap up?
Just a quick question, Ebere. I'm an independent contractor, self-employed. I don't have QuickBooks. And would you just recommend, if I do get the loan, just to put it, like you said, in a separate account? And then would you kind of write a check to yourself each month? How would you set that up?
Yes, you write it as a guaranteed payment or owner's compensation. You do not want to put the word draw on their distribution. I know some people are recommending that. I don't recommend that. Either call it guaranteed payment or owner compensation on the check. I'm glad you brought that up. If you're self-employed, you don't have to pay yourself. So you don't have to follow the typical payroll schedule where you pay yourself bi-weekly, bi-monthly, every week. You can do it twice during that 8-week period. So you pay yourself once. So if you have any concerns, you can wait until you get more guidance. So let's assume that you got your approval last week on the 13th. You really have till June 13th to take your first check. So I would just wait, because that's 3 weeks in, 3 weeks away. More guidance could come out between now and then. The people that have more of an issue that need to process payroll are those that have employees, independent, you got to get payroll in, like you can't wait. But if you're self-employed or a partner, you can afford to wait. You don't have to use the traditional payroll schedule to pay yourself, except of course you absolutely need the money. Then, you want to write it as guaranteed payment or owner's compensation. And yes, you should have a separate bank account where that is coming out of. You do not want to commingle and start getting into all kinds of issues. Also, right now, there's a battle between SBA and IRS because SBA said that the PPP loan will not be included as income and the cancellation of debt will not be included as income. IRS came behind them and said, well, if they're not going to include it as income, they cannot take the expenses for which they paid it. But that was not the rule when all this first came out. You could still get a deduction because it's a legitimate business expense. So there's an issue, a tussle between the SBA and the IRS, how that's going to happen. They're saying that the IRS is not authorized to do that and all of that, but we just have to wait until we get more guidance. All right, let me see.
A quick question here about this contract we actually signed with the PPP when we accepted.
Mm-hmm.
There is a contract with certain stipulations that initially were set by law, and now once we sign that and they come back and they change whatever they want, is that something that we can appeal? potentially?
The official guidance is that you move forward, not back. So they're not, again, it's the whole thing about the bigger businesses. They're giving a lot of leeway to the small businesses. So like I said, in this whole economic uncertainty certification, they came back and said, we have a safe harbor for small businesses. If you made your requirements and did everything based off of the old law, the old understanding, we don't need you to go back and fix it. If you have PPP of over 2 million, we need you to go back and fix it. So I suspect that, you know, it's kind of like a facts and circumstances that we can still use that guidance. If whatever was signed into law, that's what you signed on the contract, and later things change, I would not necessarily go back. I would just wait to get guidance from the bank on how they'll handle it. Most banks are not really dealing with the forgiveness right now. They're just trying to push the loans and get to the point of the loans being exhausted. Then I'm sure they'll turn their attention to the forgiveness piece and start dealing with all the changes that were made afterwards. That's also why I'm not in a hurry to do a lot of calculations now. I'm doing quick and dirty back of the envelope calculations, but there's nothing that's set in stone. The worksheet, I'm not doing the worksheet. I'm just noting things, gathering information, because I know we're going to keep getting new guidance every week.
I see. Thank you.
All right, so in the absence of any other questions, thank you all for being on. We are doing business meetings now. If you have not already scheduled your meeting or feel you need to talk to me one-on-one, really what we're doing is a quick meeting. I know I don't want to keep people too long on the phone. We're just asking 3 questions. How are you doing emotionally with everything? How are you doing with your business? Financially, how are you handling things? How's the family coming? Unfortunately, I mean, we started the meeting on Tuesday. Unfortunately, we've had 4 deaths, just with the 4 family deaths, just with the meetings that we've had between Tuesday and Thursday. And what's actually scaring me, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was telling David the other day, I said, you know what? People that are severely impacted by this, we may not even hear from them for a while, and then we're gonna find out what happened later on. That's actually what terrifies me the most. Because usually the time I find out that something happened to clients is during tax time, when you haven't received their documents and stuff. We are planning to send out letters to people, to people's homes, to check on them, make sure that they're doing okay. But, you know, unfortunately, there's some things that we're not gonna know till later on. So just keep everybody in your prayer. We're praying for you, you pray for us, everybody stay safe. If you have any other thing that you need to deal with or talk to us about, please feel free to reach out. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and